Hey guys, and welcome back to another lesson. What I want to show you today is really an interesting way to think about dominant chords. And to do this, I'm going to play a progression, and I'm going to play it in two ways. So first of all, have a listen. I'm going to start with the first way, then I'm going to discuss the differences. And now let's have a listen to the second way. So the same chords, same progression, played a little bit differently. Now you might have noticed that in the second iteration, the dominant chords sounded a bit different. Maybe they had a little bit more tension. So I want to delve a little bit deeper into why this is so. Actually, the only chord that kind of stayed the same is the E dominant 7th. But all of the others kind of changed. So let's start by looking at one of the chords. The first dominant chord we encounter is a C dominant 7th chord. So it's constructed, let's say you take a C major scale and we play the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and flattened 7th degrees. And here you have a C major chord. Sorry, C dominant 7th chord. Now, you can add higher degrees to this, and you can add the 9th. You can add the 11th, but that is rarely done for reasons I won't get into in this lesson, but you can certainly add the 13th as well. Now you can voice this in many different ways. For example, you can omit the 5th, take this 3rd, move it up here, and you have this nice sounding sort of Bill Evans style voicing. Often in the left hand, you'll end up playing the 3rd and the flattened 7th. So maybe play something like this. Maybe you'll also add the root. So the first is kind of a 2-5-1 in the key of F. So start with the C major 9th, then G minor 11th, C dominant 7th, which is really a C 13th, going to an F major 9. Now you can take the same C dominant 7th chord, and instead of thinking of this dominant or mixolydian, C mixolydian scale, you can look at the higher degrees, the 9th and the 13th, and you can decide to alter all of them in the maximal way. So instead of playing the 9th over here, you're going to either play the flattened 9th or the sharp 9. Right? So you're going to flatten it or sharpen it. And instead of playing the 5th, you're going to play either flatten or sharpen it. And you're going to throw away this 13th over here. So if you look at the collection of notes that you end up having, it will look like, instead of looking like a C mixolydian, it will look kind of like this. And this is called the C altered scale. And the interesting thing about it is that it has kind of the basic notes that make up the C dominant 7, the most important ones, root, 3rd, and flattened 7th. But it has all of these additional notes that are altered tensions. And for example, I can play the flattened 9th, flattened 5th, and also the flattened 7th, just double it up here. And I can get this C dominant 7, flat 9, flat 5. Now, although it's a kind of a first approximation, kind of dominant chords tend to either fall into one of these two categories, chords built on the Mixolydian or the altered scale. Of course, there are cases where there's kind of an intermix. For example, something like this, which would be a C 13th chord, but with a flattened 9. That kind of often encountered, and I would sort of bunch it in with the first type of chords built on the C Mixolydian, but just slightly altered. Sometimes you see these chords, but just with a flattened 9th. Now, once you get into the altered scale, you can, you play your kind of basic shape in the left hand, first, third, and flattened 7th. And in the right hand, you can just say, pick up any set of 3 notes, let's say this G flat major chord, which are in this altered scale, and you can start moving it around. Right? Here I'm moving it around. Wait a second. So this and this would really be kind of, I would think of it as the same type of dominant 7th chord. Even though one of them has a sharp 9, sharp 5, and the other one has a flat 9 and flat 5. They're all kind of taken or built on the same scale. And this characterizes the 2 progressions I've played, or the 2 ways of playing the same progression. In the first, I basically built my chords on Mixolydian scales, and in the second, I've built my dominant chords on altered scales. So, here's a C 13th built on the Mixolydian, the C Mixolydian, and here's the C 13th built on, or C dominant 7th chord built on the C altered scale. Now the only chord kind of that doesn't fit into this is the chord built on the 3rd of the C major scale, which is the E dominant 7. So in both cases, this was built on an altered scale. Now, again, you get a D dominant 7, so you can play it either as built on the D Mixolydian scale, or you can play something built on the D altered scale. And finally, the G dominant 7th chord can either be built on the G Mixolydian, kind of this Bill Evans style voicing, or on the G altered scale. Now, in my view, this kind of handles, I'd say, 80 to 90% of your dominant chord needs. This kind of question, when you encounter a dominant chord, asking yourself, am I going to build it on a Mixolydian scale or on an altered scale? And this also dictates the set of notes that you end up choosing. So it's something to keep in mind when you have to construct a progression that has dominant chords. That's it. I hope you've learned something interesting, and I'll see you next time.